Hey guys, welcome back to Film Feature 43. Today, I'm going to give you a list of my top 10 movies that I really enjoy watching, I find extremely entertaining, but aren't really talked about too much now, especially in the mainstream. Some of these films are older, 30, 40 years old, and some of them are just maybe 5, 10 years old, but people really don't talk about them anymore. So, I made a list. Let me know down in the comments what your favorite movie that no one talks about anymore is, and let's get into it. For my number 10 pick, I picked the film Doc Hollywood. If you've never seen the movie Doc Hollywood, it is a film that is eerily similar to the movie Cars, except for anthropomorphic cars being voiced by Larry the Cable Guy and Owen Wilson. It stars Marty McFly as a doctor named Ben Stone who crashes through a cow fence in a small town and is given community service to pay off his debt. It also has a love triangle between Woody Harrelson, Bridget Fonda, Lou, and Dr. Stone. So I guess that would be a love rectangle. And there's also an elderly doctor who doesn't quite care for this plastic surgeon coming into his town, but by the end kind of warms up to him, much like Doc and Lightning McQueen's relationship. Clearly, Cars is taking inspiration from this film, but I think that this film does it a little better and obviously came first, so if you're interested, check that one out. My number 9 film is The Italian Job, which is a remake of the original, starring Mark Wahlberg, Mos Def, Jason Statham, Edward Norton, and Donald Sutherland. As they get this group together, they're doing a heist, and Edward Norton, the weasel that he is, turns his back on the crew and does what Katniss Everdeen should have and shoots Donald Sutherland. The rest of the crew escapes to rob another day, and rob they do. Marky Mark puts the team back together, pulling in Charlize Theron, which happens to be Donald Sutherland's daughter in the film, and they go after Edward Norton and his stupid mustache. This leads to this Ocean's 11 mixed with Fast and Furious with Mini Cooper style film where they're driving around in these tiny cars all through Europe, and it's kind of one of those action-packed films, but it has smart twists and smart heist elements that I think would be really exciting to watch if you've never seen it. The 8th film on my list is the movie Idiocracy, which stars Luke Wilson as the most average person in the military. He's Walt Disneyed into the future to the year 2505, where his average intelligence actually makes him the smartest man alive. We have a professional wrestler as president named Dwayne Elizondo, Mountain Dew, Herbert Camacho, and the FDA, FCC, and USDA are all run by a sports drink company that waters all of the crops with the sports drink that take nutrients away from the plants, and we have a drought. Luke Wilson, in his average intelligence, knows that maybe you shouldn't be doing this, so he tells everybody, hey, we shouldn't be doing this.
Given enough time, Joe's plan might have worked. But when the Brondo stock suddenly dropped to zero, leaving half the population unemployed, dumb, angry mobs took to the streets, rioting and looting.
This is a satirical take on consumerism and kind of the idiocy that we see in our day-to-day lives, and kind of ask the question, what if this was allowed to run rampant? What if only the dumbest people reproduce, passing on their genes? Thank goodness this is only satire, but the year 2505 hasn't happened yet, so who knows. The number 7 movie on my list is the movie Fletch, which stars Chevy Chase as the titular character Fletch. He's a journalist. He's trying to break up this drug ring on the beach and get a big story out of it for the newspaper, which kind of leads him into this uneasy deal with this rich man, and Fletch goes undercover and see what's really going on, what's the motives behind him hiring Fletch. It's kind of like the Master Disguise, but, good. There's many different disguises, many different names. He's always trying to get himself out of trouble. It's pretty funny. It's actually the first film that Chevy Chase did after getting out of rehab and working through his drug addiction, which can be seen here. He seems pretty sober. He's doing improv, which meshes well with the actual script. I think it's really done well. It's before he was an old racist guy on Community, so he was probably just a young racist guy in real life, but that doesn't bleed through into the film. It's Chevy Chase at his best. My number 6 film on this list is 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. So it takes place in a small town with a grieving mother whose daughter was murdered and raped, and the police don't really seem to be doing anything about it. She rents 3 billboards outside of the town limits with sayings like raped while murdered and still no arrest and how come Chief Willoughby, and it kind of follows the reaction of the townspeople and the police in this small town in the middle of Missouri. As we go on through the film, there's different acts of violence and different outcries and support for this woman. Frances McDormand is great in this film. She plays the grieving mother. I loved her in Fargo. She does a really good job in this film. Woody Harrelson, again, is a great actor. They all play their parts really well in this film, and I think that it mixes together for kind of an emotional and yet really compelling story. My number 5 movie on this list is The BlackKlansman. It's probably one of the newer movies on this list. It follows Ron Stallworth, the first African American on the Colorado Springs police force, as he uses his
the banana and the tailpipe
voice to infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan. But there's one problem. As I mentioned a couple of seconds ago, he's African American. So he has to use his Jewish co-worker to kind of infiltrate the Ku Klux Klan in person. And we know that the Ku Klux Klan love Jewish people and African Americans. All that adds to the tension throughout this film. There's a lot of funny parts throughout this movie. They add in dark comedy. And since it's based on a true story, fact is often stranger than fiction. David Duke ends up coming in for Ron Stallworth's induction into the Ku Klux Klan, where Ron Stallworth, the real Ron Stallworth, has to escort him throughout the town, this hated racist being escorted by a black man. This film blends comedy and suspense extremely well. John David Washington and Adam Driver do an extremely good job in acting. I think they're actually both really talented actors as well. That kind of is a theme running through these films, that we have A-list actors doing these films. A lot of them seem to be passion projects for them, and I feel like that's kind of the idea behind it being a Spike Lee film. A lot of his movies tend to be passion projects for the people involved. So if you haven't seen it, definitely check this one out. 4th film on this list, and to me the most nostalgic, is the movie My Cousin Vinny, which is my favorite Joe Pesci film. It's absolutely hilarious. This is one that I have a lot of, like I said, nostalgia for. It's one that I could watch over and over again. It's one from my childhood that I watched a lot. It's definitely worth a watch. It follows Pesci as Vincent Gambini, who just passed the bar exam to become a lawyer, and he has to go and defend his cousin who skipped karate practice against murder in small town Alabama. This movie's hilarious.
What the f*** is that?
With its fish out of water premise and Joe Pesci's tough guy, smaller tough guy shtick that he does. Marissa Tomei acts extremely well in it. She's the strong-willed yet supportive girlfriend. She actually won an Oscar for this role.
Well, I hate to bring it up because I know you got enough pressure on you already, but we agreed to get married as soon as you won your first case. Meanwhile, 10 years later, my niece, the daughter of my sister, is getting married. My biological clock is ticking like this, and the way this case is going, I ain't never getting married.
I ain't slept in 5 days. I got no money, a dress code problem, and a little murder case, which in the balance holds the lives of 2 innocent kids. Not to mention your biological clock, my career, your life, our marriage, and let me see, what else could we pile on? Is there any more we could pile on to the top of the outcome of this case?
And you even have Herman Munster himself, Fred Gwynn, as the no-nonsense judge who wants nothing to do with Vincent Gambini and his shtick.
How many fingers am I holding up?
Let the record show that counsel is holding up 2 fingers.
Your Honor, please, huh?
Oh. Sorry.
So again, this is another one, if you haven't seen it, I definitely recommend it. My favorite as far as nostalgic purposes go. The number 3 film on my list is Happy Death Day. It takes the premise of Groundhog Day, kind of the scene where Bill Murray keeps killing himself over and over and over again, except for instead of Bill Murray killing himself, there's a murder on the loose, and it adds a murder mystery type element to it. And instead of Murray being stuck in Punxsutawney, we have a sorority girl being stuck on this college campus, played by Jessica Roth, who is actually an extremely good actress. I don't really know her in much else, but she does an extremely good job in this film, and she has to relive her death over and over and over again until she finds out who is trying to kill her. This is kind of like a horror comedy. If you're not really into horror, it doesn't really dive into that element as often. It leans more towards the comedy side. It's kind of a good blend. I definitely would recommend it. Speaking of horror comedies, my number 2 pick is Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. What I mean by horror comedy is this film, much like the movie Cabin in the Woods, takes a satirical look on the creepy wood hillbilly premise and kind of turns that scary horror movie wrong turn type antagonist and makes him the protagonist and makes it kind of a big misunderstanding. All that Dale and Tucker have ever wanted in their life is a cabin that they could call their own. Now that they got that cabin,
we've had a doozy of a day. There we were minding our own business, just doing some chores around the house when kids started killing themselves all over my property.
With a urban legend of killer hillbillies and Dale's ungraceful smile, hello.
Whatever you say, just smile and laugh.
You guys, going camping?
And a misunderstanding about kidnapping. It leads to a lot of death and a lot of hijinks. This one tends to lean more on the gory side, so if you're not into that, that's maybe something that you would need to decide, but it is a hilarious film. The 2 main guys are great. It's definitely one that's on the top of my list of my favorite films of all time, and it's one on the top of this list of films that really don't get talked about too often. In the number 1 film on my list, my probably favorite out of this list, and one that I don't hear anybody talk about really ever, is Logan Lucky. Logan Lucky is the Ocean's 8 that Ocean's 8 should have been. Imagine Channing Tatum and Adam Driver as a redneck, kind of blue-collar, George Clooney and Brad Pitt. Replace the Bellagio, Mirage, and MGM Grand with the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Replace the on-the-fly problem-solving with lifting a building up from underwater, or creating an earthquake as an exit strategy, or disguising yourself as SWAT with trying to figure out how to recover a prosthetic arm from inside the vault. Replace the excellent direction of Steven Soderbergh with the equally excellent direction of Steven Soderbergh, and you get this well-made kind of Ocean's 11, small town, hillbilly-esque film that I think is great. It's not talked about enough. I think all the cast and crew that are involved did a really great job, and it's just a film that doesn't get enough love. It's my top film in this list, and I think that it deserves a watch from you guys. So I guess there's a few takeaways here for my list that I didn't really realize until I started compiling it. The first thing, it's got to take place probably in a small town. That seems to be a thread throughout all my films. Probably got to be a comedy. Got a few dramas in here, but the main ones were comedies. You have to have Woody Harrelson or Adam Driver, apparently. Those two seem to be the most frequent on my list. It probably helps if it's a heist film. I had a couple of those on the list. And or it has to be a satire of real world events or a genre film. So that's kind of what my list is made up of. Like I said before, let me know down in the comments what you guys think, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.